My work, I've studied both at MIT, and I was there at a very interesting moment at the Center for Advanced Visual Studies, but the film video department, and also the media lab, which was just beginning at that time. And my role models, in a way, are people from many different fields, and I'm kind of taking little pieces of different kinds of work that they do. So I was very influenced by the artist Marcel Duchamp and his ideas, his very interesting work called The Large Glass that had writings that went along with it. But he was very interested in art and science relationships. And then at MIT there were quite interesting people like Yuri Kepish. There's this fantastic writing series that he did that relates to art and science, but he very early on. And Otto Pien, who was the director. And then in the film video department, Gloriana Davenport was a person who was really exploring interactive video very early. So I was interested. Initially, I was trained as an artist, but then when I went to MIT, it kind of opened out different potentials. But then there are other people in the field like Roger Molina, who publishes Leonardo magazine, and my PhD supervisor, Roy Ascott was also very instrumental as someone who's interested in art and science. So basically, the idea of meta-meaning is making a system that allows you, through introspection, to pay attention to your thinking in a mindfully aware manner, kind of observing the meaning as you're experimenting with it. Yes, I use these two terms, recombinant poetics and neosentience. Recombinant poetics was what my PhD was about. I've been very much interested in kind of computer-based systems that enable you to navigate poetic worlds and explore image, sound, text relationships. And the idea of recombinant is a kind of metaphor from recombinant DNA. So if you kind of think of media as a living substance, it's that metaphor that I can recombine different things and new meanings will come out of that exploration. Now, neosentience, I've been collaborating with the scientist Otto Rössler, and if we think about intelligent systems and intelligent robots, and there's a lot of writing about this, and the term artificial intelligence is the one that people often use. But I became very interested in thinking about re-examining what's at operation in our bodies. How do we come to know the world? How do our senses work together? How do we have language acquisition? And many, many different questions. And so I imagine that if there was a kind of intelligent robot, if it had senses, they would be machine senses. So it wouldn't be a kind of artificial intelligence. It would actually be a kind of new sentience that would arise, a new kind of phenomenology, a machinic phenomenology. So it's a kind of interesting paradoxical subject. You're trying to make intelligent machines, kind of where you're learning from the human, but at the same time you're trying to know and come to know the deepest knowledge we can about how the human functions in order to abstract that into these systems. And then there's kind of two sides, the poetic side where I might make poetic artworks out of these kinds of ideas or pieces of the ideas, but also really working on the science and contributing to the science in new ways, but bringing my knowledge from the arts. It's a very different kind of paradigm, almost more like the time of Leonardo, or where I might bring ideas about form and virtual reality and knowledge that I have, spatial ideas and so on. There's things floating around, excuse me. I might bring knowledge about my particular field of study, but hopefully this kind of transdisciplinary research where many people are bringing different ideas together to make something that no individual would come to, in a sense. If we look at the relationship between new digital technologies and the creative arts, the computer represents a very open system. Although we get computers and the programs are pretty much written and so on, the way I approach my thinking is that if I can imagine something that the computer might do, if I can kind of poetically think about it, then I'll work toward the way to solve that problem. And so for me, there's been this intimate relationship on the one hand between kind of computer science and how do I solve these problems, how do I make new interfaces, but how do I do that in the service of these poetic ideas or expressive ideas. And so I really see a very tight potential coupling between those two for the 20th century arts, that you can really, in terms of the computer, you can have image, you can have sound, you can have text, you can have completely new ways to interact and come to know the world, really. Well, I mean, I think if you ask me, is technology blurring the line between art and science, I would say that art and science often have two very different goals that they're seeking to do. One is very much about expression, and the other is very much about having deeper knowledge about the world. But you come to a very interesting point with new technological art, because you have to solve certain kinds of deep technological questions in order to then make the creative use of that particular program, let's say. And then alternately, you start to find that by visualizing things or by using new spatial metaphors and so on, you can also have the scientist gaining, being able to posit their knowledge in new ways, being able to come to like, let's say there's a huge data set that a scientist has come up with. But if the right person visualizes that, it becomes very easy to see, oh, this is where the anomaly happened, or this is the important moment, and so in that sense, the visual can also inform the scientific. Well, I came to Duke University through the Visual Studies Initiative. I've been chair and graduate program director at Rhode Island School of Design for the last 6 years. But at the same time, in the last 6 years, I've really been focusing on much more research-oriented, this neo-sentience area and art science issues. And Duke, as a research university, a Class 1 research university, gives me an opportunity to work and talk directly with scientists and theorists and, I mean, many different people from different backgrounds. And because of Duke's sort of transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary history, it's completely welcomed. So, for example, in the last 6 months, I've met with about 30 different scientists talking about my work and these ideas that we're talking about now. And instead of people going, "You're an artist, what do you know?" Instead, it's been a very high-level conversation and very, very interesting. And in particular with the RENCI, the group at Duke, we've been talking all about new kinds of tools and new approaches to how we can take the kind of media that I've used in one way, the kind of, let's say, the engines that enable you to build virtual worlds or to connect people in very special ways, and that those might become tools that other people can use across the sciences or different research domains.